Do you want to come up here? Oh, you do? Oh, now there's fur everywhere. Today I'm going to show you another knot. This is a knot that I like to call the balloon in the tail knot, because as it turns out, all of my knots have circus-themed descriptions. Today I'm joined by my very special, very attractive assistant. She's not even paying attention. So the balloon in the tail knot. The balloon in the tail knot is the knot that I use to finish a line of stitching. So if I'm hand stitching something and I get towards the end of my thread, I'm going to use this knot before I clip my threads to make sure that my stitch line does not fall out later. It is a very sturdy knot because it's actually going to tie directly to the weave structure of the fabric. So this is not a knot that you would use if you want to be able to take something out later. So I use it for things like garment alterations when I'm sewing something up or finishing sewing a garment related project. I use this for stitching quilt bindings, stuff like that I know that I really want them to be super permanent. But I don't use it for things like embroidery where I'm like, I might change my mind about a certain color, a certain stitch style, and I might want to take it out. Or sewing on buttons, because I like to have the option of taking my button off later. It's a trick I learned in the theater. So this is a really permanent, very sturdy knot that is not great for having to take it out later. Right, Ripley? Ripley says I'm right. All right. I've got a piece of just a sort of scrap fabric here that I'm going to use as a sample, and I've started with a fairly hideous running stitch here. This isn't what yours will probably look like if you're doing, especially if you're doing sneaky hand sewing, but for teaching purposes, just so that you can see sort of where I came from. And this is where my knot's going to end up. So you can see I have a fair distance of thread here. It's like 8 or 9 inches. And that's a little excessive, but you're not going to want to let your thread get that much shorter than this. You kind of want it in the like 5-6 inch range in order to make this knot, and you'll see why in just a minute, because you're going to need a lot of thread to sort of maneuver with in order to be able to make the knot. So my knot's going to go right here. It's going to go directly where that thread is coming out of the fabric. And to place the knot, I'm going to pick up just a couple of threads in the grain line of the fabric. So these are the threads that are making up the actual meat of the fabric, and that's why this knot is, again, just like so sturdy, and it's never going to move because it's actually tied directly into the fabric. You don't want to pick up more than just a couple, because like if we pick up something like that, that means your knot's going to have to stretch across that whole distance, and it's not going to be A, invisible, B, structurally sound. So we're just going to pick up 1 or 2 threads in the grain line like that. It's really helpful when you're doing the stitch to have like a flat surface, like a table, your lap. Don't sew it to your lap, not a good idea, but a table's great because you're gonna need both hands to sort of like wrangle. Okay, so here I am. I picked up my weave structure fabric and I'm going to pull my needle through, but I'm not gonna pull it all the way tight because, make sure you get in the loop there. So there's my loop, there's my tail. Guess what? Oop, shift my thing, let's go back. Okay. So here's my balloon, here's my tail, right? Now if I pull back on the balloon, my tail is going to shrink. And if I pull on my tail, my balloon is going to shrink. Balloon, tail, balloon, tail. It's really important to sort of understand that dynamic because that is how this knot sort of works. So here's my balloon. I've got my hand is holding my balloon open. And you're like, oh no, I'm really worried that my balloon is gonna like blow away. I don't wanna lose it. So I'm gonna be like, I really wanna hang on tight to the thread. So I'm gonna reach through the balloon and I'm grab the tail. Notice that this hand, my needle hand, doesn't move at all during this process. But you're gonna be like, I'm very anxious about my balloon. And I'm gonna pull my tail through the balloon and I'm gonna keep pulling away from the needle. And notice that my balloon has now disappeared, but lo, a new balloon. What? Here we go, same dynamic. Pull the tail, balloon shrinks, pull the balloon, tail shrinks. Super cool. So now that I've done that once, I'm gonna do it a second time. I'm gonna reach my fingers through the loop, I'm gonna grab the tail, I'm gonna anchor the needle with my right hand and pull the tail with my left hand through the balloon. As I pull away from the needle, what? OMG. Now look, you could do that all day. It's called crochet. We don't need to do that, right? We just need 2 of those sort of like pull through the balloon knots or like hooks in order to really anchor this knot. Then you're gonna be like, damn balloon, I'm sick of your stunts. And you're gonna flip the needle, you're gonna pop the balloon, grab the needle with your left hand. Now that your left hand has the needle, your left hand is gonna stay totally still. And your right hand is gonna grab the tail, right? It's gonna pull in the opposite direction all the way down. Now I've got a balloon over here. Whoa, I mean, it's basically cat's cradle, but like functional. So now that you've popped the balloon and switched hands, this is how it's gonna create a knot, right? Because we've made like a full loop hook situation as opposed to just like a crochet or a chain stitch. So we are at the point where we're ready to tie it off. So I'm gonna put my thumb right on that knot just to sort of hold those loops in place. And I'm gonna pull the tail until my knot is totally tight and my balloon has completely disappeared. Let's look at that close up. Look at that cute little knot. It's like very small and it sits right where that thread was coming out of the fabric. Now, if you're not, if you don't really care about how visible this is, you could just go ahead and clip your threads like about 1/8 of an inch. I wouldn't get that much closer because you don't sort of want your knot to like fall apart and fall out of the fabric. So like 1/8 of an inch is a pretty good distance. But if you want to be super sneaky, you can do what I like to do, which is to insert your needle back into the fabric right under the knot. So sort of maneuver the knot out of the way. And you're gonna move your needle away, just somewhere else, somewhere not near your knot. I have this fabric folded a couple of times so that I can actually be super sneaky. See, I'm not even going through on the back. I'm sort of just hiding it between the layers. And that is very common because usually when you're sewing more than one layer together. So I'm gonna hide my needle. I'm gonna let my needle sort of travel between the layers of the fabric. And then I'm going to pull my needle all the way, right? I'm gonna take my scissors and I'm going to clip my thread here, super flush with the fabric. Because like, what? It's magic. Well, bam. This is my other helpful assistant, Malcolm. One of the things that I really love about hand stitching is that it can be sneaky. You can do some things to make your stitching look very, very incognito or even completely invisible. And it, for me, is very empowering because it means that I can take apart a garment, make alterations to it, put it back together in a way that no one can tell. And that takes a lot of the fear out of messing with stuff, because if no one can tell you messed with it, then it's totally fine, like whatever. So now that I've shown you how to make the balloon and the tail knot and sort of hide our tails at the end, I'm going to show you a sort of way of doing the balloon and the tail knot as a starting knot so that you can keep your knot as incognito as possible right at the beginning of your stitch line, and that way make a super invisible stitch line, which is like very, very, very pleasing. To do the balloon and the tail knot as a super sneaky starting knot as opposed to an ending knot, we're basically going to reverse engineer how we created the knot. So I'm going to take my needle and notice that I don't have any knot at the end of my thread here. I'm not starting with a circus French knot because I'm going to start with the balloon and the tail knot. We ended our last knot away, sort of like elsewhere, right? So this time I'm going to start my knot elsewhere, hidden on both sides, can't see it. And I'm gonna bring my needle up where I want my knot to be. So like, let's say we want it one stitch in the future. So I'm bringing it up sort of like along that line of travel. And I'm gonna bring my knot out, or my needle out. And so this is what's really important is I don't wanna pull it too far because I don't wanna accidentally pull it out while I'm tying my knot. So I'm gonna leave a little bit so that I can see it and I can like get an eyeball on whether or not I'm pulling it too hard. Now we're ready to sort of do our balloon and the tail knot. So I'll do a sort of less florid version. Needle goes through. I'm being very gentle so that I don't pull my, my tail all the way through. So I'm holding it open, grabbing the tail, pull it tight, holding it open, grabbing the tail, pull it tight. Now that I've done that twice, I'm going to pop the balloon, grab the needle. Needle stays still, needle always stays still. Pull the thread so that the balloon shrinks. Anchor my knot, pull my knot. So there's my starting balloon and the tail knot. I can take my scissors and clip, ooh la la, so sneak. And now I can sort of like go on my merry sewing way, boop, 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 like so, until I'm ready to tie off, and then I can do my balloon in the tail knot again. Maybe the invisibility of hand stitching, like maybe that's where my circus theme came from. I don't know, but it's a good theory. Quick note about dominant hands. I myself am right-handed, but you'll notice that when I was doing my knots, I did one with my left hand, sort of like pulling the balloon was over here, and one with my right hand where the balloon was over here. Hopefully that was helpful for people who have two different dominances, and you can find one that feels more comfortable to you. Obviously, I sort of do it with both, so maybe try it both ways. I think I kind of make my decisions on the fly based on where the body of the fabric is or what direction I'm sewing in. So just see which one feels better for you, and maybe keep the flexibility open to try to be able to do it from both hands, because, you know, more hands the better, right? So that was the balloon in the tail knot. I hope that was clear and that this can be a helpful knot for you guys while you're doing your sneaky hand sewing. If you have any additional questions or something didn't make sense, please feel free to put it in the comments and I can try to clarify. If you have requests for other demos that you want to see, again, go ahead and put them in the comments, send me a message. You can email me at fibaristanora@gmail.com. You can also follow along with all my sewing and cat-related escapades on my social media. So it's fibaristanora at Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram. He actually just wants my chair.